Hi everyone, I'm Sarah Martin, the Associate Director of Forecasting at Dodge Construction Network, and today we'll be looking at the Momentum Index for July. Now, as a reminder, the DMI tracks the value of non-residential building projects as they enter their earliest stages of planning. All projects are under the value of $500 million, and we also exclude manufacturing and transportation projects. Typically, this index leads construction spending by about 12 to 18 months. Now, we had a bit of a unique month for the DMI. We saw the index hit a historical high of 280.4, up 21% from the upwardly revised reading of 232 in June. Commercial planning was up 14%, and institutional planning was up a very strong 35%. Now, to really understand what's driving this trend and this month's growth, we really have to dig into the data this month. As you can see, even when we pulled data centers out of these numbers, very strong growth was seen in the other commercial sectors as well as on the institutional side. So starting on the commercial side, we did see pretty broad spread growth across most sectors. A lot of this growth is coming from warehouse activity, which has been really steadily picking up in the last few months, as well as some growth from the automotive sector. We saw a slew of service station projects enter planning, specifically from the Mass DOT. A lot of these projects were valued at only around $50 million, but they ultimately contributed, right, when put together, about $700 million into the queue. So that really drove the auto sector kind of up pretty strongly over the month. We also saw some high-value hotel projects close to that $500 million enter the planning queue in July as well. But really, most of this growth can be attributed to the historical highs that we saw on the institutional side. So education, healthcare, and even public planning experienced really strong month-over-month growth. The healthcare portion of the index was up so strong. Was very strong, and most of that can be attributed to, again, a slew of hospital projects entering the queue after announcements from the Hospital Corporation of America. So we saw a lot of these higher value hospital projects all entering planning in the same months following kind of the announcements from HCA. On the education side, we saw high-value research and development laboratories, and even some big libraries entering planning as well. K through 12 and college planning continued to be pretty subdued, but really those higher-value R&D labs was the key to that growth. That sector, when looking at it kind of from a raw, unadjusted basis, R&D laboratory activity didn't hit historical highs. It was actually close to some of the peaks that we saw back in 22 and 23 when that sector was really ramping up post-pandemic. So levels, we certainly haven't seen that level of activity in the past year and a half. So massive growth, but again, not a historical high. But really, when you put that all together, right, some big announcements from major companies or specific owners, really putting a lot of projects into planning at the same time that I think that underlying growth, that underlying momentum has begun to pick up in recent months. When that all came together and culminated, it resulted in this above average month of activity for July. A reminder here that this also is a 3-month moving average. We saw some upward revisions to June that's contributing marginally to some of the growth here. And then it's also likely that owners and developers, when they're assessing these projects, they're likely facing higher material costs or they're factoring in higher material and labor costs. And that's creating some inflationary pressures for these values as well. Owners and developers, for the most part, from a starts perspective, have sort of been on the sidelines to some extent in the first half of this year. So maybe owners and developers are just beginning to recognize that the uncertainty isn't going away. We won't get much clarity in the near term. And so let's just move forward with projects. Let's put them into the planning queue and make that happen. So that, I think, is driving some of that reacceleration in growth this month as well. All right, that about wraps it up for me. Thank you so much for watching.